Events in retrospect often change or they're emphasized in some way as we look back on them. Um, and I want to talk about a day in history, a personal day in history. I'll just at random select one, not really. There's a reason I'm selecting it. The day is May 17th, 2019, a year ago yesterday. And this day has gained some new significance for me based on a couple of things that have occurred. But one of them, obviously, some of the things that we're going through right now. May 17th was around early afternoon. My mother arrived from New York to visit, and she got in time to go pick up the kids. She wanted to surprise the kids at school and things like that, and so we were able to do that. And now it was significant. It was a good time spent. Right? For 3 weeks she stayed with us, and it was a really good time. And yet it has, in retrospect, it's gained more significance because of some of the things that we're going through. Right? She had said that she was debating at the time. We were talking this week, and kind of reminiscing and she was looking at old photos, and she remembers that she had been thinking about putting it off for about a year. And I thought of, what she wouldn't obviously have been able to come. There would have been, it would have been too difficult to come out from New York and all the things in place. And it just wouldn't have been, even if she had come, and sheltered in place with us for whatever weeks, it wouldn't have been the same. The things that we wouldn't have been able to do just because everything's closed. So that is gained. We've looked back on that just a year ago this week, and gained new significance of those things. Another thing that happened on May 17th, I hadn't thought about it ever since. We just kind of do things, and life continues, and it's gained in a different way, maybe some significance. But I recalled that earlier in the day, one of our elders stopped by, and they had bought. I don't know if the church did it or he just planned on doing it, but bought us a new computer, and bought me a new laptop, and mine was getting kind of old and defunct, and I mean it still worked and things, but it was kind of an eyesore and whatnot. So he bought me a new laptop. Now, why do I know that? Now that I think about it, I remember, oh yeah, he stopped by early in the morning and the house was all clean. Not because the elder was coming, because he completely surprised us out of the blue, but because we were planning on my mom getting there. So we had to, well, good thing that the house was clean when the elder and his wife popped over. But the reason that has significance is because yesterday, I got to church, our first day doing in-person services, and my computer, I opened up my computer only a few hours earlier because I'd stayed up late at night working on my sermon, readjusting this and that. And I got to church to print off everything, and my computer wouldn't turn on. And I didn't think of anything, and I go home and I'm looking for the receipt, and I ended up having to go to Sam's Club to reprint the receipt for hoping this is still covered and everything. And I look at the receipt. I didn't even look at it until today when I was calling HP, and May 17th. I was like, wasn't that wonderful? And you're worried about the warranty running out, and so here's this day in which my computer had been replaced because of an aging, non-working computer, and then of course on the anniversary, the computer acts up at the worst possible moment, and it could have been worse. Obviously, there could have been no warranty, and fortunately, our elder had the foresight of buying the extended warranty, so it'll be a minor inconvenience. But here it was that you kind of just accepted a thing and were thankful for a thing and just kind of moved on, and lost the significance of it. I mean, I still enjoy using it because it's still much better up until yesterday than my old one. But we tend to put things in boxes in life and move on from them, and just don't think that we'll return to those again in a significant way. And here it is, and how unlikely is it, certainly, to have two such events on the same day, a year later, come back with some significance. Um, there's a story, a biblical story, that there's probably lots of biblical stories like this, but there's one in particular that makes me think of this type of an event, and that's in 2 Timothy, and it's one of these passages that it just kind of, it's there, and you don't really think of it, and and what is that there for? Why? It's significant of some sort. What is the lesson I can learn from this? And I think it's connected to this, and it's at the end of 2 Timothy as Paul is concluding, and he's asking Timothy to come quickly. Timothy, I believe, is still in Ephesus, and Paul wants him to do a couple of things for him. Paul is about to die, and he says he wants him to bring four things. He wants him to bring some books, which is especially the parchments. Were they biblical books? Were they letters? This has been endless debates over this. The subject of a lot of different opinions. Probably some parchments, which were some scripture from Old Testament, or maybe just some writings, maybe some of his own writings. So who knows? But they were apparently sentimental to him. Maybe letters from people, whatever they were. So he says, bring the books or letters and especially the parchments. Bring a cloak. Bring a cloak. What was the cloak for? I mean, if you're cold, can't you get a cloak? I mean, Luke was with them. Why couldn't Luke go down to the Five and Dime and or the local open market Walmart thing and get him a cloak if he's cold? Obviously, he had left this one and he wanted it had sentimental value. I believe it was left in Troas, and so he says, so get that and bring that with you. And maybe this was a cloak of somebody that was dear to him, that he remembered. Who knows? Maybe there's conjecture. Was this Stephen's coat that he kept? And this has got sentiment. There's all sorts of conjecture about this cloak, but we'll never know. But it did have sentimental value, and as his life is concluding, it has incredible value to him because of what emotions are attached to it. But he asks to bring one more thing that's very, very important to him, and that is John Mark. The history of John Mark with Paul is an interesting one. They set out on a journey with Paul and Barnabas and John Mark, and John Mark got as far as Cyprus, which is, I believe, as far as he had ever gotten before in his life, and he just couldn't go any further, and he's like, I'm going back. I can't do this. This is too big for me. So Paul and Barnabas continued on, and they had, kind of been counting on John Mark. Remember, Luke wasn't a part of their group yet, and a lot of them, Timothy wasn't a part of their group, so John Mark was, kind of counted on and didn't follow through. Well, when it came time for the second tour, Barnabas wanted to take John Mark. Paul said, absolutely not. He's deserted us once. I can't trust him. And again, more debate. Was Paul right? Was Barnabas right? And they had a contention over it so strong that it split up Paul and Barnabas. Now, God used that for good. Barnabas took John Mark, and John Mark became a good preacher, so far as we know, and so far as we can read from the scriptures. It seemed to develop him. That was Barnabas's quality. And Paul went and he started lots of churches, and maybe taking John Mark would have hindered them and slowed them down or done all these things, but God used it for good. But at the end of his life, Paul says, bring John Mark. I don't know if he had ever made up with John Mark. Maybe that's what was useful, because he says he's very useful for me. And maybe that was the useful part. Maybe it was the sewing up of all, there's been years and years of this thing underneath, and we need, that's the one part of my ministry that I really need to sew up, is this emotional thing that's been between John Mark and me, because they've not been together. They've been in different places, and maybe they've crossed paths here and there, I don't know, but it's certainly reasonable to think that they had not crossed paths since that moment. And regardless, when we look at our life, things don't get packed neatly away in boxes. They come up again, and sometimes for the good, and sometimes there's some bittersweet to it, a bittersweet purchase that, yes, but it's not working now, or a bittersweet relationship, that we can look back, think of the positives, and think of, it was nice, but now in retrospect, knowing what we know now, and this is a sad situation, and it reminds me of positives and negatives that have happened, and but remember and take a lesson from Paul to appreciate those moments, and to be fond of those things, and use events to look back, and when possible and when necessary, to revisit those relationships and repair what needs to be repaired in the moments that you have them, because the time will come when you don't.